Hey everyone. So my name is Austin. I'm a product designer here at GitLab, and today I'm going to be presenting on the category for compliance management, talk about kind of where it is today and where we're trying to take it in the future. And this all kind of falls under the compliance group. To provide a little more context, the compliance group falls into the managed stage. We have a couple other categories as well that we're responsible for, like audit events and audit reports, but today's talks will be just focused on compliance management. As a tie into that, our main persona that we're trying to solve for is Cameron, the compliance manager. A unique attribute about Cameron is this role isn't necessarily like a job title. So unlike maybe like Sasha, the software developer, you don't really see anybody carrying necessarily a compliance manager job title. It's more like an additional hat that someone at a big enterprise is probably wearing as a way to try and keep their software development within the confines of specific regulations. To better understand how Cameron or perhaps even Sydney, the system administrator, is performing specific jobs related to compliance, we're conducting a bit of research right now to better understand their workflow and some of their responsibilities. This is more just to show like we're trying to better understand this more novel concept that we've been introducing into GitLab over the last year. Something that I uniquely learned about this process when I was crafting like the screener interview. Compliance means a lot of things to different people. And I don't think we're necessarily specific enough when we were screening participants. Something that I would have gone back and changed would have been introducing what regulation do you have to abide by for your compliance. Discovered there are a lot of people that do compliance, just not anything related to the regulations that we care about. So moving on from there, compliance management was introduced in 2020. It's in a minimal state. And just to summarize the intent of it, we're just trying to make compliance less of a headache, less of a pain. It's something that comes up like quarterly, semi-annually, in a regular pattern for companies as they're building out their software product, and they just have to produce these audit reports and be ready at any moment to show whether or not they're ready to go in terms of their regulations that they have to meet. And so with that, there's been a lot of excitement in the industry in terms of checking out what our competitors are doing. Microsoft recently announced the general availability for their compliance manager. This caught some of our leadership's attention. Eric was bringing up questions about it, talking about how like, this is what I see like for compliance management within GitLab in terms of just like the visual aesthetic and whatnot of it. And so while we are very excited to see a bunch of competitors and different companies trying to help solve problems for compliance, it helps validate our position to try and also help solve it. We're also trying to start with the building blocks to get there. So Daniel was a designer on compliance before I joined GitLab in June, and he opened up an epic to kind of cast this vision for where like the compliance dashboard's going, a key component of compliance management. And Matt, my product manager, and I are continuing to work together to try and show how we're going to progress that through this epic. So why not just like make the thing? Something that I love to do just when I feel like I've gotten stuck in the weeds is maybe think about things at a higher level, try and like tie together a bunch of cool ideas that I see in the industry just to kind of play with some of the options that we have as a way to, I don't know, bring a little excitement to the team and look at things in a way that we haven't necessarily thought about before. But when we dig into things like the Microsoft like compliance manager, we see that there are these like controls and stuff that have to be in place in order for you to be able to provide recommendations and show you all these like beautiful charts that show you that you're getting closer and closer to being ready for your audit or showing how well you are meeting your compliance expectations. And so I thought this issue demonstrated pretty well how like there are different types of controls that map to specific frameworks. And so we're trying to capture some of these things. A lot of these things already exist today in GitLab, let's say at the project level, like you can customize your push rules and merge request approvals and protected branches and so on and so forth. But some of those things aren't as extensive at the instance and group level. And so a big effort we've been trying to do is to like create some parity across the different levels within GitLab so you can provide more flexibility to those compliance managers that are trying to administrate their GitLab spaces. So those building blocks are super crucial. And today, like I said, compliance management, it's quite minimal. You can go in and you can add a label to a project. If there are 5 that we give out of the box, they don't do anything necessarily. You just kind of can say, hey, this project has to abide by the SOX regulations. but GitLab's not forcing you to do anything. A way you can leverage these labels to start administrating all the projects that you have using these would be, for example, you could customize your merge request approvals at the instance level and attach it to a compliance framework so that everybody with GDPR has to follow exactly what you outlined there in your instance. So besides kind of like setting up the compliance management for GitLab, you can monitor somewhat how your projects are abiding by or not abiding by the compliance that you set forth. So the compliance dashboard today shows you just the most recent merge requests for each project. And you can imagine how like seeing that at a group level, like, I'm going to miss, some merge requests if they're very active. Like GitLab's a very good example of that. We have merge requests coming in all the time, and if we're only showing the most recent one, we know that there's probably stuff that's being missed. And so we recognize that there's like a lot of opportunity in terms of improvement. We're just trying to help identify what do we do next in order to best improve the compliance management category overall. So talking a little bit about how that evolution is unfolding, the left side shows you the current view of our merge requests page on the compliance dashboard. It tells you a little about each of those merge requests, but what we've really been hearing from some of our customers and a few of the people we've been interviewing for jobs to be done is they really want to see the information in terms of like a chain of custody. They want to be able to see this record of how the merge requests impacted specific compliance metrics they care about. So these could be things like knowing how this affect code coverage, how did this affect our performance, how did this match our security scan expectations. Today, Cameron would have to go into each project and check out all these things individually. And what we've heard is that's very painful, especially for companies that have like thousands of projects in GitLab or even hundreds. To click into each one, have to get pinged on a bunch of different merge requests. It can be very cumbersome and easy to get lost in the mess and trying to understand like what is our holistic view of compliance today. So we're trying to refine what we currently have, but we're also trying to investigate what we have in the future. One way that we're trying to extend the way that we do some of our solution validation, since we don't have that much currently available in production today, is bringing forth a lot of the great ideas that like our team and our product management side have introduced and putting together a bit of a visionary concept for like, what if we introduced it this way, like a new page, and just demoing it a little bit with some of our customers. We've been able to get some really great feedback just by showing them things and doing like just a quick gut check, like, does this make sense to you? How would this help you in your workflow? And sometimes you hear things like, oh my gosh, yeah, if I could have this one thing show me like, yeah, there are these violations, that would be super helpful for me to know exactly where I need to go fix projects. Or they might say things like, the security stat, it's nice to know that, but it's not super helpful to me in this instance. I could just go somewhere else to find that information. Getting just a little bit of that direction helps us better understand what exactly we want to do in terms of prioritizing what's important next. I wanted to highlight a few questions actually that Mike had actually asked me, and I thought they were really good. So the first thing he was asking was like, how are you using this to better inform your solution validation? Like I was saying, getting that quick feedback from customers and some of our sales calls, like it's been helpful because Cameron's not an easy persona to identify and get feedback from. And so getting that direct feedback from the customers that are using it also feels like that gives them a voice into the product itself. So it's been really cool to see them vocalize that. And we've also gotten really great feedback in terms of seeing like, we've got 25 customers that want this many licenses want this type of feature. And that helps us guide the conversation better within issues as we're moving through the validation track. The right-hand side shows a little bit more of a refined MVC that we took from the inspiration on the left. So one thing that we're identifying is push rules at an instance level, they don't necessarily get inherited down all the way to a project. So what do you do if you're Cameron and you've set these instance level settings, but now you have thousands of projects and they're all doing something different? You want to be able to know if they've deviated from your sensible defaults that you've set so that you can keep them in line. Not necessarily because like you think they're inherently doing something wrong, but just because that is a responsibility that you have to make sure that they're abiding by the correct push rules. And it may be okay, and it may not be, but we want to be able to give that dexterity to Cameron so that it's easier to perform that job function. Another really interesting question that Mike was asking me was, so how do you like make sure compliance doesn't get in the way of everything? And I think it's really two things. The first thing being that we try and embed it so that it's more seamless into the process. we don't want it to feel super cumbersome that teams are having to be compliant. And for lack of a better term, I just want it to feel like you can continue doing your work and be compliant without knowing it. So by gentle guidance along the process, we can help teams make sure they're abiding by it without necessarily feeling they have to read thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of documentation around controls and policies and make sure you're meeting everything. A great example of this is a lot of teams require that a merge request have an issue or a JIRA issue or a ServiceNow ticket to be associated with the merge request in order for it to be merged. That's not something that is enforceable today in GitLab, but we would really love to continue moving towards that direction. So we have an issue out there right now that would allow you to enforce some sort of relationship to be linked. And if that linkage doesn't exist, then you can't merge just yet. So as soon as you create that linkage, great, you can merge. And you don't have to worry about knowing all the policies. GitLab is helping you be compliant. The other thing is trying to keep compliance a little bit isolated from the rest of the workflow. We know that for developers, they don't necessarily care about knowing about compliance. That's for a different persona. That's for Cameron, that's for Sydney. So we want that to be a little bit different from how everybody else is experiencing GitLab. It's just the boundaries and guidelines that we're trying to put in place to make it a safe place to build and ship software. We don't want to become the hurdle that prevents people from shipping software. We just want them to feel safer doing it. So that way, that pain they might feel later on in an audit won't necessarily happen for just a little bit of effort up front. If you knew earlier on that you needed to attach a merge request and link it to a JIRA issue or something like that before you merged, that's a lot better in terms of just solving that quick pain point than finding out in an audit at the end of the quarter that you have all these merge requests that aren't meeting expectations and then having to have a nasty conversation about what does that mean if there's no linkage between the merge requests and an issue. So with that said, just to kind of summarize where we are today, it's minimal at best for compliance management. We're continuing to build small building blocks along the way because we want to reach that visionary idea where we're really driving the compliance frameworks, where we're helping teams be compliant along the way of their GitLab journey. But to get there, we got to have the foundation set well so that we can really help guide teams in the future. And with that, thank you for your time. I didn't see any questions actually pop up in the chat, but obviously let me know in issues or in the docs.
Thank you, Austin. I actually have a question, and sorry I didn't pop it into the chat before. It seems to be that you are touching on some of the functionality that other teams are also working, like the dashboards or like the MAR widget. Are you collaborating with the other stage groups around those?
Yeah, definitely. I have found that a lot of our issues that we have open, it's like there's usually some sort of other category or other group that we're touching on. And it's been really fun for me to get to collaborate. Like I think of some really great conversations we've had with Pedro and Marcel around the merge requests view, because we've been trying to introduce a couple of compliance features in that page. And while we have opinions on where we think things make sense, they've been super helpful in asking really great questions, helping refine ideas down, keeping it towards minimal impact so that we're better preparing users to use actual features themselves as opposed to being super disruptive and potentially breaking something that we didn't know as much about.
Thank you for that. That's amazing. Yeah. Anyone else has any question or comments?
Yeah, I'll make a comment, which is, so first of all, thank you for the collaboration. I also really enjoyed hearing you talk about how you're looking at that larger vision and getting it in front of customers in a, seems like kind of a minimal, low fidelity-ish way to say like, hey, is this even what you want? So that way y'all can work backwards from what's actually going to be useful. I think the more of that we can do, the better, because it saves us a lot of time and resources building things out that people may not want. To put some reality around this, I've worked places where development every year would have to stop for a month for manual compliance audits. And that was so people could go through and literally manually look at everything that had happened in the other 11 months of the year and go, are we compliant? Yes or no? And then, I mean, not only is that time consuming and tedious and it kills the company's velocity for a month, but it's also not super accurate, right? I mean, now you're relying on, have I seen everything I needed to see? Have I made the connections that I needed to make? So automating this, building it into the regular workflows to where, like you talked about, it's like I need to know, here, the information is there. There's nothing else I need to do. That's really, really powerful for, especially for larger enterprise customers.
Yes, very well put, Christy. That's exactly the same way we feel.
All right, thanks a lot, Austin. I'm gonna pause the recording.